So, picture with me. Jesus is walking, making his way back to Jerusalem. And there's a series of stories, principles that he's outlining. And he's just at the height of his teaching and the height of his connection and meeting people. And wherever he went, there was a divine appointment. If that's a new term to you, it's one that oftentimes we use in the church that means that God has placed us in a certain spot in front of a certain person for a certain reason. We call that a divine appointment, meaning that God needed Jesus to be a part of something for bigger reasons than just for that person. We'll get into that in a minute. And he's walking along, and he hears these 10 men with leprosy crying out to him. And before we read the text, let me help you understand what leprosy is. Leprosy is something that we don't see very often. In fact, the medical term for leprosy today is actually called Hansen's disease. Hansen's disease is one that affects your nerves. And when you can't feel anything, like you could have your hand on a stove or in a fire, or an animal can bite you and you not know it, or you could be dealing with infection and be unaware of it. And being unaware of it means that you're not going to get the attention that you need, and so gangrene sets in. And oftentimes with leprosy, entire limbs would fall off, and it wouldn't be clean. And it would be a mess. And leprosy was something that in ancient times, those with leprosy were the lowest of lows in society. Meaning, it was very much like a caste system. And you and I probably aren't aware much of the caste system. How many have traveled to India, for example, and aware? So some of you know that you understand that a little bit better than the rest of us that haven't traveled there. And we know that there's the haves, and then you have the have-nots, and then you have those at the bottom, the untouchables. Not only could you not touch them, you had to stay, depending on which way the wind was blowing. Somewhere I read that they had to be 150 feet away from anyone who wasn't unclean, was the term that they used. They literally could go decades until they died without any human touch whatsoever. In our Western thinking, we can't properly understand this, but there was more than indifference for them. There was actually more than just indifference or a lack of sympathy, but rather there was this attitude or this thinking that was prevalent in everyone's thoughts, that they obviously had to have done something wrong to be in that place. Hey, do you remember when in the Gospels where the disciples came to Jesus and they said that this boy was blind, and they said, what did the boy do, or what did the parents do to deserve this? And the only reason I bring that up is that there's this general perception or idea that was strong, that obviously they did something to deserve it. I mean, we still do that to this day, don't we? When you hear someone that has lung cancer, what's the first thing that we ask? What is it? Did they smoke? What's it matter? We don't show sympathy for someone who smoked that has lung cancer? That's ridiculous. So that's as close to an example that I can give you in our society. And so as you have these untouchables, men and women who literally were kicked outside of the city. What's the purpose of that? Well, the purpose of that is obviously it was contagious, But they lacked protection, they lacked services, they lacked proper meals, they lacked family and friends, and the family literally would just give them a boot. And so with that picture in mind, I want to read Luke chapter 17, 11 through 19. It says this: On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was passing along between Samaria and Galilee, and he entered into a village. And he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance, because they had to. We talked about that. And they lifted up their voices, said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Verse 14, when he saw them, he said, Go and show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. And then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned around, and he started praising God with a loud voice. In fact, verse 16, it says, he fell on his face at the feet of Jesus, giving him thanks. And he was a Samaritan. And then Jesus answered, Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? No one was found to return to give praise to God except this foreigner, this non-Jew, this unclean person. Verse 19, he said to them, Rise and go. Your faith has made you well. In the next couple minutes, I'm going to talk about something that's so hard, it's so difficult to get our arms around. It's like picturing a little boy putting on his father's boots and standing and trying to walk, knowing that his little feet are about this big and the boots to him are about that big and about his weight. That's what it's going to be like for you and me. And as we picture what Jesus is demonstrating here, he's going to call us to something in a few minutes that I just want to prepare you for. But before I do that, I need to help you understand something. If you're not aware of this, you need to. In fact, I'm going to do you a favor. If you understand this, it's going to shed light on any time you read the Gospels. And I'm going to answer the question, why did Jesus even perform miracles? And we assume that the miracles are for the purpose of the person that he is performing the miracle for. So the first miracle was what? Yeah, turning water and wine, unless you're a Baptist, and it was turning wine into water. It was a very different, but it's very similar in a lot of ways. So you've got Jesus who went and performed this miracle and basically saved the wedding. So we just had a wedding last month. We're going to have another wedding in 3 months. And then our next child, she can get married in the next 20 years. And so that's kind of how we're doing that. And so when you're at the wedding and you've got all of your friends and your family and it's the music's going and the people are there and you're just all kind of dancing and having a good time and just picture no food and like half the people got chicken cordon bleu and the other half don't. Just like that. No one wants salad. So no chicken, no cake, just broccoli. That's what happened. Jesus saw what happened, and it was an opportunity. And there's 3 things. There's 3 reasons why Jesus performs miracles then and now. Number 1, miracles vindicated his claims about himself and his teaching. The miracles themselves were not ways for Jesus to show off his power, especially since he'd given up his former glory to come to earth to begin with. But it was so people could understand his claim. What's his claim? He was God. That he was the Messiah. And he had to get people's attention and let them know, listen, I know it's kind of crazy. And I know you may not believe this. And I know I'm asking you to believe a lot. But look at these things that I'm doing. That should say something. So number 1, it's his claims of who he is, and that is his deity. Number 2, so that others might believe. Like John chapter 10, verse 37 and 38. He didn't perform miracles in fact, There were times that he was asked and didn't. In fact, when he died, was buried, and rose again and ascended into heaven, there were still people who were poor, there were still people who were sick, there were still people that were hungry, and there were still people that were blind and deaf. So if his purpose was to come and make the whole world a better place, he failed, and he failed miserably. In fact, I'll just say this about those 10. We already know, I read the story, so I'm not going to ruin the story for you. That only one came back to say thank you and to receive more. 9 went away, but eventually those 9 were going to die. He saved their lives temporarily, but they surely died of something else. We would know it by now. Oprah would have had them on TV by now. They didn't die from leprosy. Once he did that, they were healed, but died of something. So first is to declare his deity. Number 2, so people could believe. And number 3, to teach a particular lesson. There was something at that moment that he was trying to teach. It was a principle that he was trying to convey. And the miracle helped create that. It was like a big old huge object lesson. I wish I could do that. I think that would be great. At the end of every message, I could bring someone up and perform a miracle. I'd love that. This building probably wouldn't be big enough, but that's what Jesus was doing. There was always something else at play. I mean, look at Mark chapter 8. He's talking about having eyes that do not see, and having ears that do not hear and do not remember, and then healing the blind. As an object lesson of some of us are blind. In fact, some who are physically blind see him as the Messiah. Others who could actually see don't. So there was something else at play. There always is every time you see a miracle happen in the Gospels. So what can we learn from this story? Number 1, I want you to know this, that grace givers' reputations are earned by who they are, and they are earned by what they do. Verse 11, on the way to Jerusalem and passing along Samaria and Galilee, he entered a village, and he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance. Notice this, as I pondered this passage, they knew his name, they recognized him, they knew what he was capable of. They'd heard people talking about him. And probably one of those guys said, this just seems like our way out. I mean, I'd heard from someone about this man who was walking through Galilee and he was healing the blind and the deaf. And hey, if he can do that, why can't he do us? And they saw him. But it was from a distance. And it made me think this. What do people think of me when they see me or hear my name? What do they think of you? It's sobering. Not what we want them to say about us. Not what we would hope we would hear. But what do people really think? And Jesus had earned this reputation of just being a grace-filled and grace-giving person. And in general, do people see us as one that just cares? Or that we always have to be right? Or theologically we're correct? Or we're the ones that are going to make the situation better? Or when people see us, they go, she is so kind. I can almost say anything to her and she would just be kind. Talk about little feet in big shoes. You know what I noticed this morning as I was kind of looking at my notes last minute? I noticed something. By the way, you can't do this with every passage and every text, but if you notice in verse 7, and we don't have it on the screen, this was just kind of a late addition here. Luke 7, chapter 17, verse 7. And so if you're on your phone or if you're going to old school analog pages, you'll notice in verse 7 it says, let me just tell you the story. Jesus starts telling this story. He wants the disciples to understand their role as servants. And he says this, and you can read it later and check how accurate I am. I think I'm pretty accurate. Jesus says, here's the deal. If you were the master and you had money and you had houses and you had farms and you had animals and you had a big family and you had servants, and the servants went out and he says they went and they plowed all day. And so you picture these big animals and plowing and sweating and tired. He says, and they go out and they've gone from the very beginning of the day, as soon as the sun pops to as soon as the sun comes down, and they come home. And he says this, when your servants come home, do you say to them, oh, please, come sit in my chair and let me get you something to eat. Put your feet up. Let me grab you something to eat. Let me get you something to drink. I bet you're hungry. Oh, I bet you're thirsty. He says, no. You say, get cleaned up because you're about ready to serve me dinner. And then when I relax and retire to the den and put my feet up and read the paper, then you can go to the kitchen and eat. Do you realize that there's some in this room that cannot believe that text is even in the Bible? That's Jesus' teaching. It's red lettered. It has to be true. It really is. Why do I bring that up? Two reasons. One, it's the passage right before the text that we're talking about. But here's the bigger one. Particularly in the Western church, we have this concept that our faith and our journey to know Jesus is all about me and you, and that all of us are the center of his story. That no matter where God sends you, no matter what God is doing in you, no matter what illness you may be facing, no matter what kind of challenges that you may have, no matter the way that God, you think that he has forgotten you, and no matter what is occurring in your life, we have this concept that I don't think we'd say it, but I felt it. God owes me. Because I've been plowing the fields all day. In fact, it's Friday. I started Monday. I deserve it. And Jesus has given us some balance. So when he comes to this text about the 10 lepers, he's saying, I understand it's hard, but you don't have a choice. And you don't hear that very often. It doesn't preach really well. It's not a good Facebook post for me tomorrow morning. It flies in the face of an attitude and sometimes even a theology. It says, what about me? You see, Jesus never promises to exalt us. He always promises to exalt himself. And if we're only willing to exalt him on our terms, we're not willing to exalt him. I've never said anything more true. I've never said anything more difficult. And I don't know the untouchable person in your life. I don't know where you live and where you work and by the way, take off the table right now the guy at the corner begging for money. We all go there. Just take that one off. I don't even want to talk about that. There are so many other places and times in my life that this applies, but we all want to go there because we can all create this bulletproof, airtight reason why that's not helping society. Okay, I'll give you that. Take it off. There's probably someone else in your life and mine that society would view, maybe not fully untouchable, as we have seen and watched through the scriptures, and maybe as you see, maybe in India and so on. But there's still folks in your life and mine that others kind of shun. And when the cameras aren't around, we have the reputation of caring for them. A few years ago, we were invited to a charity event. It was Coyotes players, that's a hockey team, and politicians. Oh, and you'd recognize the names if I had the courage. And all the TV channels showed up. And I realized of all the times to go serve food at the Phoenix Rescue Mission, which by the way is a wonderful organization doing great things, why did I pick this one? I mean, we could barely, there were, all of us peons, we're all in the back, and everyone else, there's these huge athletes and politicians, and as soon as the cameras were packed up and the microphones were taken off, the politicians were gone. I remember one of them went up to say hi, and it was just like I completely annoyed him, which I loved. It's really easy, isn't it, to care for others when no one's around. Because that's where our reputation is really made. Number two is grace givers don't show judgment. They use logic. I'm not saying grace givers are stupid. I'm just saying they don't show self-judgment on others. Verse 13, it says, lifted up their voices saying, Jesus, have mercy on us. Mercy was the last thing that they were receiving from anybody. Most of the time they just got indifference, like they didn't even exist. What do people know they will get from me? What do they know they'll get from you? Judgment? Advice? Cold shoulder? Reprimand maybe? Maybe just indifference. Like they don't even exist. Side note, to naturally show mercy to others first requires that you and I have received mercy ourselves. And that's what I'm starting to feel this week. Have you ever asked God for mercy? Or do you ask him to fix things in your life? Asking God to fix things in your life and asking for mercy are two very different things. Asking for help or advice is saying, God, we're a team, and I could really use a little bit of help here. It'd be like playing 2-on-2 basketball and saying, God, these opponents are really good. Could you, and I'm going to have Michael Jordan help me out. And together, between me and Mike, we'll beat these two. And everyone's like, you're a nobody. I'm a nobody. I'm a servant. According to the passage before, I'm just a servant. So are you. So unless we come to the point where you have ever in your life asked and begged for mercy, I venture to say it's going to be hard to impossible for you to show it to someone else. I have. It's humiliating. I've been to places in my life where I could only look to Jesus. And I would take my phone out and wonder, who is it that I could call? And I'd scroll through the contacts, hoping that there'd be someone, and there's nobody, until finally I realized there is no one except for Jesus. And when you and I come to a place in our life where we have begged for mercy, He's created an opportunity for us to demonstrate mercy to somebody else. It's that coming to the point in our life where it drives us to our knees. It doesn't drive us to our phones. Hold on, I just got a text message. Number 3, grace givers give with no strings attached. Little feet, big boots. Verse 14, when he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. Now, this is a couple things to be interested about. Go show yourselves to the priests. Why? Why was it important for them to show themselves to the priests? Well, the priests are the ones that controlled those that lived in the city, within the walls. And so you didn't have a civil judge or court or system. The priest was the system. And so it wasn't go show yourselves to the priests to tell them about me as this religious leader of sorts. It was, no, go get permission, show them, turn around, do what you need to do, and then get inside the city where you belong, go back to your family and go back to your friends. And what's interesting as I've studied this passage is, and you would notice it too if you just read it over and over and over, there's more things that pop up. The one thing that struck me is that he healed them from a distance with a word. And they knew it. He didn't make them pray. He didn't make them give money to the poor. He didn't make them declare him as God. He didn't baptize them. They had to say and do nothing. And before you dismiss that as perhaps something insignificant, don't miss this. So many times in our life, we believe that we have to do something or be something for God to somehow bless us. And God blesses and loves and cares deeply with no strings attached. In fact, you want to know how few strings? 9 didn't even come back and say thank you. Only 1. Jesus actually already knew only one would return. He does ask the question, doesn't he? By the way, as a side note, not even Jesus was able to save all the lost, but he was willing. His evangelism conversion rate was way worse than we can ever imagine. You ever share your faith with someone and you talk about the things that God's done in your life, and someone in kind of a patronizing, placating way goes, "That's nice." Almost like they want to pat you on the head, like, "That's nice." You're like, "Don't touch my head." You go, "No, you don't understand. God is alive in my life, and he's doing things that I can't fathom. God's doing things in this church that, quite frankly, we've done nothing different in the last 2 years, 3 years, and God is starting to do things, or check that, allowing us to see how he's doing things in ways that we couldn't see before. I believe he's always at work. And he's always at work in your life, and he's always in the process of healing. And so here's Jesus who comes along and he heals 10 men, and 9 of them are like, I got what I wanted. And only one says, just the right thing is to do is to come back and go, remember me? Thank you. I led a small group of men for many years. It grew to the point where we were Tuesday and Thursday, and we just had this room filled with guys. And I love men's groups where I can just kind of be myself and be my goofy self, and we can say what we want, and no one's going to judge anyone, and no one's going to, not that women judge, it's just sometimes I feel like I got to be extra careful with women, and guys, you can just be, you can just be a total goofball. It doesn't matter because we're all goofballs. And I'd meet somebody whose life was in disarray, and their wives left them, and for good reason, and they just did all kinds of stupid things, and when asked why, what did they say? They say it every time. I don't know. And so you got all these guys, and they come, and I said, listen, I don't have time, I don't have the ability to meet with you every week, but come to this group of men, because there's other men that also have done some really stupid things, and they've begged God for mercy, and they've brought us all together, and we kind of lift each other up. And so they come, and so my conversion rate was about this, about 10%. They'd come for the 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and they kind of got it to the point where they got their life back together again, and they got to move back home, and their adult kids started talking to them again, and they got another job, and they started getting some income, and then they'd miss 1 week, and then they'd miss 3 weeks, and then suddenly you never saw them, ever. Oh, until there was a new tragedy. It's all of us to some degree. All of us, me included. Jesus comes along and no strings attached. If you and I are going to be grace givers, we cannot give with strings attached. It's not grace giving at all. It's your earning goodness. It's called work. Work is you do things and someone repays you. And Jesus never operated under those pretense. Lastly, letter D, grace givers care about health, wealth, and eternity. What do I mean by that? Verse 19, he says, rise and go, your faith has made you well. You know what confuses me? Why didn't Jesus ask him to come with him? Why didn't Jesus take that 10th man? Let's call him Chuck. Why didn't Jesus look to Chuck? I mean, wouldn't it have been great? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Chuck. The 5 Gospels. Why didn't he say, Chuck, come with me? And he's like, really? Yeah. No. He came back and he said, in essence, I appreciate the fact that you came back and said thank you. I think it speaks loudly of who you are. He did ask, where are the other 9? And Chuck's like, I don't know. I mean, they were right here a minute ago. Where are they now? I don't know. But then he said, he falls down on his knees, on his face, it says, at the feet of Jesus, and he says, I just want to tell you thank you. Thank you for giving me my life back. Thank you for taking me. I was kicked out of the city, and now I'm allowed in. Thank you for giving me a life. And then Jesus does something remarkable. He says, rise and go, and your faith has made you well. Literally, Your faith has made you well. And you look at the text, and it doesn't take but 2 times to read it, and you go, I thought he was just healed. Isn't that why he came back? Oh, it is. But the implication here is that he received something way bigger and greater than his physical health. He introduced him to eternal life. And he says, your faith, your acknowledging of who I am, the relationship that now we have, that you have come and you have recognized who I am. And he says, your faith has made you well. Then he says, go. Some of you have stories. Better yet, nix that. Some of you are in the middle of a story right now. And I want to give you more hope than maybe you've ever received while in this crisis. Listen to me. God is in the middle and in the business of doing something so grand and so amazing, so spectacular, that there's only one person that's going to ever receive even an ounce of credit, and it's Jesus. That's how I want to lead this church. That's how I want to give counsel and care for those that come and see us. We want to be able to say, oh, no. Your eyes are on the leprosy. Take your eyes and fix them on Jesus. Because the day before they were healed, if someone said, what are the chances? What would be the chances of those 10 men being healed? What number would you just want to throw out? Go ahead. Yeah, 0. And I don't know what God's doing in your life, and I don't know where he's got you, but all I know is that when we humble ourselves and throw ourselves at the feet of Jesus and say, this problem is your problem. This mess is your mess. My future is your future. When we get to that point where we go, God, it is just yours, not mine. He says, oh, I'm about ready to do something super special, and not even you can take credit for it. And I'm like, count me in. And I know some of your stories. When you give us a prayer card in your program and you tell us how to pray, we take those very seriously. And our prayer is yes for healing or for finances or for marriage or for the bankruptcy or the job. Or, we're trying, we pray for those things, don't get us wrong. But what we're really praying is, God, as you show yourself and as you perform these miracles in our lives, in your life, we're saying, God, just be exalted. That's what caregivers and grace givers do. We want to bestow as much as we can, but it's not from us. I know that if we could go through all of Anthem and New River and Desert Hills and Tremont, I try not to forget any, but there's so many little, I don't know where you all people live, but wherever it is you live, and we just decide we're going to pay every electric bill and every water bill. No, we can't afford water. It's too pricey. And then, so we do all of those things, and we pay for your pool guy for a year and all those things. A very slight percentage would come back and say, that's really cool. We want to know about Jesus. You know what most people would do? Thanks. You going to do next year's too? Right? I mean, even if I had the money. Throwing money at things isn't the answer. You know what is the answer? pointing people to Jesus. Every single time. And if you heard me say it last week or the week before and it's getting old, oh, come back next week because I'm going to say it again. Every week. I don't have the answer, nor do you. Jeremy, come on up here, buddy. Close us in a song. And why do we sing at the end? With what we've heard and what we know is we want to be grace givers. By the way, how many want to be a grace giver? Let me see your hands. Okay, 10 of you. That's not enough. So, I think we all do. I think we all want to be grace givers. And we all want to point people to Jesus. And we all want to do those things. And at the end of the day, I just like celebrating that. And Jeremy, I don't know what song you guys have in mind, but I think it's time for us just to celebrate who he is and understanding. And this song is where we want to hear you more than ever. Let those voices come out and God say, you know what? Our real work and our real ministry and our real purpose is all week. Starting this afternoon at the Super Bowl party and all the way to the end. That's where God's going to use us, not here. This is where we get pumped up and encouraged. But first, I'm going to pray for you because some of you are going through things that are bigger than you. God, I don't know who those folks are, and all I know is every single time I bring something to you and I beg for mercy, you always respond. You're always there, and for that I'm grateful. And God, I can't fix financial problems. I can't fix physical problems. I can't fix relational problems. We don't have the capacity to do those things like Jesus did. And even if we did, God, that's not the answer. But the one thing we can do is point people to Jesus. Hear us as we sing.